Change whispers before it arrives, not in grand declarations or sudden revelations, but in the quiet discomfort of realizing you can no longer live the way you've been living. The patterns feel too tight. The old responses no longer fit. Something inside has shifted, and return is no longer possible. Real transformation is not what the world sells. It is not motivation or discipline or the force of willpower against resistance. It is something deeper, quieter, more honest. It is the slow unraveling of who you thought you had to be, and the patient rebuilding of who you actually are. Not a better version, not a fixed version, just a more integrated one. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming more fully yourself. It begins with a feeling that refuses to be ignored. You go through the motions of your life, the routines, the relationships, the roles you've always played, and something feels wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not crisis-level wrong. Just persistently, quietly misaligned. The career that once felt right now feels like a costume. The relationships that once satisfied now feel hollow. The person you present to the world no longer matches the person you sense yourself becoming. This is not dissatisfaction. This is outgrowing. The shell of who you've been starts to crack, not from external pressure but from internal expansion. You are becoming too large for the life you've constructed, and continuation without change becomes more painful than the uncertainty of transformation. This knowing arrives without permission. It cannot be reasoned away or distracted from. It is the quiet insistence of your actual self, finally loud enough to be heard above the noise of who you thought you should be. But who you are now was not accidental. It was built, piece by piece, from necessity. The child who learned to be quiet to keep the peace. The teenager who learned to perform to earn love. The young adult who learned to suppress to fit in, to succeed, to survive. You became who you needed to be. Each adaptation made sense in its context. Each protective pattern served a purpose. The personality you wear was crafted carefully, unconsciously, from 1,000 small moments where being yourself felt too dangerous. And it worked. The constructed self got you through. It earned approval, avoided rejection, created safety in an uncertain world. But constructions have limits. What protected you at 7 constrains you at 30. What helped you survive childhood prevents you from thriving in adulthood. The roles you learn to play become prisons when you forget they were roles at all. When you mistake adaptation for identity, performance for truth. Transformation begins with recognizing this. You are not fundamentally broken. You are brilliantly adapted to circumstances that no longer exist. Yet the brain resists change with remarkable ferocity. Neuroscience reveals why transformation feels so difficult despite genuine desire. The brain is not designed for growth. It is designed for efficiency and survival. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition, creating automatic responses that require minimal energy. This is why familiar patterns feel effortless, while new behaviors feel exhausting. The old pathways are highways, well-worn and easy to travel. New patterns are rough trails, requiring conscious effort with every step. The amygdala, your threat detection system, responds to change as danger, even positive change, even desired change. Because change means uncertainty, and uncertainty means potential threat. So the brain pulls you back toward the known. It generates anxiety when you attempt new behaviors. It whispers that transformation is too hard, too risky, too uncertain. It offers the comfort of familiar suffering over the discomfort of unfamiliar growth. This resistance is not personal failure. It is biological protection. Your nervous system is trying to keep you safe the only way it knows how, by maintaining the status quo, however painful that status quo has become. And so you enter the most difficult territory of transformation, the in-between. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. The old patterns have loosened their grip, but new ones haven't solidified. You exist in liminal space, undefined and uncertain. This phase is excruciating, because humans crave coherence, consistency, a solid sense of self, And in the in-between, there is none. Just flux. Just becoming. You question everything. Who are you without the familiar defenses? What do you actually want versus what you were taught to want? Which parts of your identity are authentic and which are adaptation? The answers don't come quickly. They emerge slowly, through trial and error, through sitting with discomfort, rather than immediately resolving it. This is where most transformation fails, not from lack of desire, but from inability to tolerate the uncertainty of not knowing. The urge to rush back to the familiar, to solidify into something, anything, rather than remain in the uncomfortable flux of becoming. But transformation requires this space, this not knowing, this patient waiting while something new emerges from the dissolution of what was. Then something shifts, not suddenly, not completely, but unmistakably. The change that was once intellectual becomes visceral. You don't just understand differently, you feel differently, experience differently, respond differently without conscious effort. This is the moment when transformation moves from concept to embodiment, when new neural pathways have been traveled enough times that they begin to feel natural, when the nervous system recalibrates, and what once felt dangerous now feels right. You notice yourself making choices that 6 months ago would have been impossible, setting boundaries without guilt, speaking truth without rehearsing, allowing yourself desires you once believed were selfish. And it doesn't feel forced anymore. It feels like return, like remembering rather than learning, like uncovering what was always there, beneath the layers of adaptation and performance. This is the secret the self-help industry doesn't tell you. Real transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about removing what was never actually you, until what remains is simply, honestly, yourself. What emerges is not perfection, but integration. You do not become flawless or fixed or finally finished. You become more whole. The parts of yourself that were split, the acceptable and unacceptable, the light and shadow, the performed and authentic, begin to coexist rather than conflict. You learn to hold complexity, to be both kind and boundaried, both vulnerable and strong, both complete and still becoming. The past is not erased but integrated. The patterns that once controlled you become tools you can choose to use or set aside. The wounds that shaped you become sources of wisdom rather than sources of shame. This is what real transformation looks like. Not the dramatic before and after of marketed change, but the quiet deepening of self-understanding. The expansion of capacity to be with yourself, exactly as you are, while remaining open to who you might become. You stop searching for the final version of yourself and start living as the version that exists right now, imperfect, evolving, enough. And you realize that transformation has no end point. You will not arrive. You will not complete. You will not achieve a state of permanent okayness, where growth stops and maintenance begins. Instead, you learn to live in the ongoing process of becoming, to recognize that change is not an event, but a relationship with yourself, with life, with the constant flux of existence. Each resolution creates new questions. Each integration reveals new edges to explore. Each moment of clarity gives way to new uncertainty. And this is not failure. This is being alive. The goal was never to become fixed. It was to become fluid, to develop the capacity to meet yourself with curiosity rather than judgment, to hold your own evolution with compassion rather than criticism. Transformation is not about reaching a destination. It is about learning to walk the path without needing to know where it leads. Change whispered, and you listened, not with grand gestures or forced reinvention, but with quiet attention to the misalignment between who you were and who you sensed yourself becoming. You unraveled carefully constructed defenses. You sat with uncomfortable uncertainty. You allowed old patterns to dissolve without rushing to replace them. And slowly, patiently, something more authentic emerged. Not perfect, not complete, but more yours. This is the secret to real transformation. It is not about becoming better. It is about becoming truer. Not more disciplined, but more honest. Not more controlled, but more integrated. Not a new person, but a fuller expression of the person who was always there, waiting beneath the performance. The work continues. The becoming continues. And that is exactly as it should be. Because you are not a problem to be solved. You are a life to be lived. Complex, evolving, perpetually unfinished. And in that ongoing becoming, you are already whole.